welcome to another edition of the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast, the show that is for the fans, by the fans. I am your phenomenal host, Mr. Podcasting, Chris Belcher. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Chris Belcher24. The show is at PBW Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Make sure that you give us a follow, interact with us on social media. We greatly appreciate that. Whether you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Anchor, Google Play, or wherever you are listening, or if you're watching our smiling faces on YouTube, we appreciate you doing that as well. Best way for you to help the show is to hit that subscribe button. Give us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it. That way you get a notification every time that a new episode drops. Speaking of subscriptions on our YouTube, please make sure that you are entered in our giveaway. That's right. For the month of July, we are going to give away a free PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast t-shirt. So it could look something like this. So all you have to do is go check out our YouTube page. All right. Hit that subscribe button. That's step number 1. All right. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you get subscribed to us. And then step number 2 is take a screenshot of proof of your subscription. So when that subscribe button now says subscribed with a D, take a screenshot of that. All right. And then step 3 is going to be to share that on the social media platform of your choice. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, doesn't matter. Just tell your friends why you subscribed, why they should subscribe, and tag the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. Okay. That's very easy. As long as you do those 3 things, you will be entered to win a free PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast t-shirt. All right. So if you have already subscribed, you are still eligible to enter as well. What you need to do is go to our YouTube channel, share the link to your favorite episode on whatever social media platform that you want. Tell everybody why that's your favorite episode. Tag us in it. You're entered to win as well. Okay, so this is going on the entire month of July. We're going to give away a free t-shirt at the end of the month. So I've seen a lot of people that have subscribed lately. Thank you for doing that, but I haven't seen anybody share it on social media. So make sure you do the second portion. All right, make sure you get that shared on social media. That way that you can win a free t-shirt from the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. All right, so that being said, make sure you check us out every Monday and every Thursday, wherever you find your podcast or on YouTube. Make sure you check us out. We got brand new content rolling your way on Mondays and on Thursdays. New school, old school, there's something for everybody. All right. So if you are just now checking us out, this is your part 2 of the A&E Biography series. All right. A couple of weeks ago, myself, my brother from another mother, Jared Justice, and my dad, Billy Belcher, we tackled the first 4 A&E biographies. All right. So if you missed that episode, that was 2 weeks ago, make sure that you go check that out. All right. Some really good discussions about Stone Cold Steve Austin, Roddy Piper, the Macho Man Randy Savage, and Booker T. All right. So make sure that you go check that out. Now, on this coming episode today, we are going to talk about the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. We're going to talk about the Ultimate Warrior. We're going to talk about Mick Foley, and we're going to talk about Bret the Hitman Hart. All right. So some really good discussions. Jared and my dad are joining me once again for part 2 of this A&E Biography series. Make sure, again, that you follow us on social media and share your favorite episode. That way you get entered into that contest. Spread the word about the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. We do this for the fans because we're fans. All right. We try to crank out this content that you guys want to hear. So if you have stuff that you want to hear us talk about, shoot us a message or a comment on social media. We will be happy to respond and bring it up on the air. All right. So check us out. A&E Biographies part 2. And then make sure that you check us out this coming week as we preview Money in the Bank. That's coming up next week. Live crowds are officially back. We're going to talk all about that as well. So make sure that you tune in. All right. A&E Biographies part 2. Here we go. Let's jump to my favorite and yours, the greatest of all time, the one that I looked forward to the most. Of course, I'm talking about the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, not the Ultimate Warrior. The Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. When this guy's documentary came out, let me just tell you that I had my doubts that I would learn anything about Shawn Michaels because, as you guys know, I'm an ultimate Shawn Michaels fan. But Jared, one of the things that I learned about Shawn was his role in NXT and how hands-on he is and how much not just those guys in NXT look up to Shawn as their favorite wrestler, but as their friend and as their mentor. And to me, that was really cool to see that the ultimate greatest of all time is giving back the way that he is. Was there anything in the documentary that maybe you want to piggyback on that, or something else that you might have learned about Shawn that you didn't know?
Just basically how that Whisper, the Nitro girl, whenever that he got together with her, it really seemed like she helped him to become a better person and to get away from some of those demons that he had. And the story, it almost brings a tear to your eye of like his child getting up on, climbing on top of him and saying, "Daddy, how come you sleepy? How come you sleepy, Daddy?"
Yep.
I mean, that's sad, man. And it helped Shawn wake up and think, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
What kind of example am I setting?
Yep.
And he turned his life around, man. And so, I mean, I think that Whisper, I think she did him a lot of good, man. I'd hate to see where he'd be at right now if not for her.
Yep. That is 100% accurate. Dad, you'll enjoy this. One of the things that I learned that I didn't know is that Shawn based his Heartbreak Kid gimmick off of Freddie Mercury and Elvis. I didn't know that. You being the Elvis fan, I didn't know that. What did you learn about Shawn that you didn't know?
Well, I learned he liked Elvis. I didn't know that.
He did. That's true.
And as everybody knows, I'm the biggest Elvis fan ever. So,
well, that's true.
That surprised me. I think that the two things that I took away from it that I learned that when him and Mario Jannetty signed with the WWF at the time, they come and signed the contract and were supposed to wrestle the next day. Well, they got fired.
Yep.
They didn't even get to wrestle one time. They went out and partied and drunk. And Vince said, "Get him out of here." Undertaker said, "Well, he's just a peckerhead. Get him out of here." So, and it's funny coming out of Undertaker's mouth. He said that because him and Shawn's real close. And then
I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that because it was the thing where Shawn and Marty, they both. Marty was on this documentary, by the way, and he looks terrible. That's a whole other podcast. But Marty
kept his persona going.
Whoa, he looked bad. But anyway, one of the things to know about that situation is that Shawn and Marty have both been vocal by saying, "Look, this is our shot at the big time. We're going to come in. We're going to lay low. We're going to be chill. We're not going to party. We're going to just come in and do our jobs." And the boys would come up and be like, "No, you got to come party. You got to go party. You got whatever." And then Billy Jack Haynes comes and takes a bite out of a shot glass and eggs them on. And finally, Shawn just whacks the shot glass over his head. One thing leads to another, and then they get fired.
They got fired and didn't even wrestle the first match.
What was your other thought?
The other thing was that they had a dark match with the Hart Foundation, and they actually won the tag team titles.
Yeah.
And then, as Vince says, it didn't happen. So they give the titles back to the Hart Foundation.
Because the rope broke.
And the rope broke, and it wasn't on TV. So it didn't happen if it wasn't on TV.
It's so sad.
And the thing about between Marty and Shawn, and this goes back, and Roddy Piper injected in this. I think he kindly started this.
He did. Yeah.
He told Shawn, "You would be better off without him and being a singles guy." That's the way Piper said it. Better off without him. Yep. And you won singles. So
that's very true.
I don't know. That's what's the best move Shawn can make? Anyway.
Right. Well, absolutely. And then he and Marty created the legacy. Jared, you mentioned it earlier when we were talking. I think we were talking, maybe it was on the other podcast. I don't remember. But talking about how you don't want to be the Marty Jannetty of the team. Shawn and Marty established that. That's part of Shawn's legacy, whether he likes it or not. It is. It's part of Marty's legacy too. One of the other things that's part of Shawn's legacy that they didn't include in this documentary, not that I necessarily wanted them to, but there's a personal story out there about Shawn. Jared, you mentioned his recovery. You mentioned him coming back and how he was turned his life around. And when he came back, he said he wanted his son to watch him wrestle one time because his son never got to see him wrestle. Well, Shawn told Hunter, he said, I want to wrestle you. You're the one guy that I trust. And they were going to have a street fight at SummerSlam 2002. And as the story goes, Shawn hadn't been in the ring in 4 years. He broke his back in 98. He retired, came back in 02. He hadn't been in the ring in 4 years. He and Hunter went up to headquarters to work out the match, to kind of get the rust off and whatever. And as the story goes, he took a couple of bumps and he hit the ropes a couple of times. And he stopped Hunter and he said, I can't do this. And Hunter said, what are you talking about? And Shawn said, I cannot rehearse this. It has to be there. It just has to be there when the match happens. And then for Hunter to go on and say, it was like he never left the ring. To me, that's one of the main reasons he's the greatest of all time, because he can go 4 years and it's like nothing has changed.
Yeah. I mean, every time you see, a wrestler come back like Edge or whoever after a decent amount of time off, you always see or hear about how they're working that rust off. And man, it's difficult to kind of get your body to where it's calloused to those bumps and to those shots again.
Right.
Triple H said that Shawn, man, it was like he never left the ring. Right. Is that not amazing?
Yeah, it's incredible. It really is. It just goes to show you, again, that he's the greatest of all time. I don't care what anybody says. Dad, even Ric Flair said that Shawn Michaels is the greatest of all time. It's on that documentary. I'm just saying.
I've seen
it. Shawn Michaels is the greatest of all time. And one of the things that proves that for me is my favorite Shawn Michaels match of all time. I'll talk about it till I'm blue in the face. Jared knows what I'm talking about. It's WrestleMania 25 against The Undertaker. It's the most perfect match in wrestling history. To me, nothing ever gets close to what those guys did in that match. Undertaker nearly died in that match, but that's neither here nor there. But that match is the greatest match to me of all time. Now, Dad, I'm not asking you to tell me what the greatest match of all time is, but if you had to pick out a match or two from Shawn Michaels that really sticks out to you, or a moment or a memory, what would you say?
Well, I'm not going to say a match because, and you don't drop your water or whatever you're drinking or whatever when I say this.
Uh-oh.
He is the greatest in-ring performer of all time.
Hands down.
That's tough for me to say, but for his size, his ability, his ring ability, he is the best that ever was.
Yep.
Now, personal life, but the best memory for me is he changed his life and he went from one man to another. He stopped and went on. That's the most important thing he did in his life. That's a highlight for me. As far as his wrestling goes, every time he stepped in the ring. But I will give you one tidbit. One of his favorite moves is going across the ring upside down.
Yep.
Who did he get that from?
He got that from the Nature Boy.
Okay.
He talks extensively in the documentary about how much of an influence Flair was on him. And then they went in depth talking about Flair's retirement match and how Shawn scripted it all out. And he woke up in the middle of the night and he was crying and writing it all down and whatever.
I just wanted to point that out to you.
Yeah. You listen, all you got to do is take you take something from somebody. It's not stealing if you can make it better and, all that kind of stuff, whatever. Anyway.
Well, and I told you before we started, my top four is Flair, Stone Cold, Undertaker, and Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
That's my Mount Rushmore right there.
It's hard to argue. Jared.
And one more point I was going to say about Shawn was, well, go ahead. I have to come back to it. You can come back to me after I get in here.
Okay. Jared, I already said WrestleMania 25, so you're not allowed to say it. What kind of match or memory or moment sticks out to you about Shawn?
I mean, people say what they want to say about it. WrestleMania 12. Even WrestleMania 11, him against Diesel.
Yeah.
But then you go into WrestleMania 12, and I remember, man, me and you get on the trampoline and reenacting this match so many times.
Yep.
And maybe now it's not like the best thing to go back and watch for an entire hour of your life.
Right.
But at the time, man, it was unlike anything that we had seen. And there were basically only two guys that could do it, and it was Bret and Shawn.
Bret and Shawn.
Just the boyhood dream and everything that was made of that, that was right, right in the middle of our childhood and growing up, and something that meant something to us. And it meant something for us to see that this guy who's undersized, underutilized, has now conquered the world of wrestling. So I think that was awesome. I
definitely agree. And then, Dad, to get to your point, one of the things that anytime you see a Shawn Michaels highlight video, one shot that you always see is Shawn Michaels. He's grabbing a rope and he's swinging off the top of the house at In Your House. Ladies and gentlemen, that was in Louisville, Kentucky. That was my first pay-per-view. Dad and I were there in person. So any highlight video you see of Shawn Michaels, he's swinging off the top of the house, we were there. So that's a fun memory.
And to piggyback on top of that, my favorite moment, and it's just about my favorite moment of all time in wrestling, is when he looked at Flair and said, "I'm sorry, I love you."
Whack.
The best moment ever. Yep. Then when he kicks him, he goes down and he's hugging him to death.
Yep.
And they're both crying, and that's my favorite moment.
I mean, it's hard to argue that that's not one of if not the greatest stories in wrestling history. And that was, I mean, that you could argue that was officially the changing of the guard, that Ric Flair was saying, okay, that this is your business. You are the best. I'm hanging it up. Here you go. Obviously, I think Shawn was the greatest before that happened, but you could argue that happened there.
And I think that was Jerry Lawler not calling that match?
Yep.
He made the comment that Ric Flair didn't phone it in.
Nope.
I mean, he was scripted, but he made it look like, man, this is my last leg. I'm going to go as hard as I can. You're
exactly right. And all of those things, everything we just talked about, WrestleMania 24, 25, WrestleMania 12, everything wraps up. Shawn Michaels is the greatest of all time. It's hard to argue, no matter what your opinion is. And that's not me just speaking as a Shawn fan. It's hard to argue that this guy's body of work, his first run and his second run, is not just some of the greatest stuff you'll ever watch in your life. So we go from the greatest to not so great.
Oh boy.
We talk about the Ultimate Warrior and all of his destrucity, as he likes to say. I will say this. I did not realize that he had such struggles with his dad. I knew they were estranged, but I didn't realize what all the struggles that he had. I'm not going to give Warrior a pass for his life or, whatever, but I can see where all of that bad stuff that happened with his dad and how it affected his life and how he really wanted to be a better dad for his girls. So personally, I'll give him a pat on the back for that. As much crap as he gave everybody else, Vince McMahon and JR and everybody included, as much crap as he gave everybody else, the guy had some personal demons and he tried his best to get over them. Some people succeed and some don't. Dad, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, so I'll let you take over for a minute about Warrior.
I don't want to disrespect the man as a human being, and I will give him this. He did show, and it showed in the biography, he really was a good dad and cared about his kids. I will give him that.
Yep.
You can't disparage him for that. But you go back, Booker T grew up without any parents. So a lot of people does that. And then, some people can't get over, that. So maybe that played into it. But as far as a wrestler, I hope no Warrior fans is listening to me.
Okay, who was a worse wrestler? I'm gonna put you on the spot. Who was a worse wrestler? Jared, I'll ask you this too. The Ultimate Warrior.
Who was the worst wrestler?
No, wait. Between these two guys, who was the worst wrestler? The Ultimate Warrior or Bill Goldberg?
That's hard. I would say Warrior's worse.
I'll say Warrior.
Okay.
Goldberg at least could like pick people up and jackhammer him and hit spears from different angles, and he had a couple matches where he got thrown around.
Yeah, in his heyday, he was really stout.
Yeah.
I can't say much about his later WWE stuff, but he's kind of dropped the ball. But just to run out there
into a non-moving fist that was put out by Andre.
Yeah.
Full steam ahead, whack, right into a fist. I mean, what kind of idiot does that?
And then you go out there and you grab the ropes, okay? A 5-year-old can do that. You run out to the ring.
Yeah.
You don't have no finishing moves. You're just doing a belly flop off the top rope.
Yep. Hey, listen, a belly flop off the top rope might not have been effective for the Ultimate Warrior, but if Andre would have done that, he'd have killed
a belly flop.
He's not even in Andre's league. His belly flop off the top rope was no better than Hogan's leg drop.
That's true. That's true.
Same move. But when you said who was the worst, I was going to say Warrior, then Hogan, 1A and 1B.
Oh, gosh. Wow. Speaking of Hogan, Jared, they talked a lot in this documentary about the SummerSlam 91 incident where Hogan and Warrior were a team against, I think it was Slaughter and Adnan and whoever else. It was 2-on-3, whatever it was. Anyway, and that was the night that Warrior held Vince up.
And he wrote and Mustafa, I think.
Adnan, Mustafa, and Slaughter. That's what it was. Yep. So that was the night that Warrior wrote Vince this letter of all these grievances that he has and how he wants to make the money that Hogan makes and yada, 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 whatever. And it was very fascinating to me that while he held Warrior up that night, there was a spot in the match where Warrior is chasing one of the guys out of the ring with a steel chair. And when he comes back through the curtain, Vince hands him his response and fires him. How fantastic is that?
It's cold.
It is cold.
It's cold.
I thought it was fantastic. I really did.
Well, that's Vince.
That is. Jared, I know.
Say something to the effect of earmuffs, everybody. But I'm just repeating. Didn't he say something like, I couldn't wait to fire his ass? Didn't he say something along those lines that he was just looking forward just to get back?
He said a lot of things in the documentary that were. And then when they made the tape. When the tape they made of him.
The self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah. I mean, that just. And like when Vince said Bret screwed Bret, well, the Ultimate Warrior screwed his own self.
Yep, that's true.
Vince just had too much of him. He just couldn't take no more.
Right. That's true. Well, his bank account wasn't going to be able to take much more either, trying to pay Hogan and Warrior all at the same time. I mean, that's ridiculous. But, Jared, we know that we've talked about this. You and I grew up as Warrior fans. Warrior was the thing for kids. WrestleMania 6, I've watched that main event till I was blue in the face and could memorize it and recite it to you at one point. But we've said that Warrior's probably worse than Goldberg. What did this biography do anything to you to kind of open your eyes about Warrior or help you out in your Warrior fandom, if that is a thing?
My Warrior fandom would have been better if they would have never released anything ever about the Ultimate Warrior and just let me talk what I thought about him, which was he was this dude that was like a Greek god. he came in there and, he clotheslined and did his big jumping, like, elbow things or shoulder things.
Right.
And, like, then he would do the gorilla press and flop somebody down behind him and hit the ropes and do the big,
Sure.
big splash.
Sure.
But he was very colorful in his outfits. He's another one that had to have spent tons on his personal outfits to make them unique. And he had that body that was probably better than anybody's in wrestling as far as looking like just ripped. You had your big guys like Hogan, that had some fat on their body and muscle. But then you have the Warrior who has zero fat and is just solid muscle, like you took, something and just chiseled him out of stone.
Yep.
And so, my outlook on him would have been much better if I'd never learned anything about him other than what I knew growing up.
Right. And Jared, you were talking about, outfits and all that stuff. You talk about, look, this is a very recent Ultimate Warrior figure that just came out. Look at the detail on this. And that's not just for like an action figure to sell. This is what his gear looked like. Yep. Look how cool that. What kid wouldn't want something like that? And that's exactly what it appealed to. Personally, yeah, he was a jerk, but when he was out in front of the camera, he was what people wanted to see at the time. So as far as Warrior's legacy goes, yes, he sucked as a person as far as the wrestling business. You didn't see a lot of his peers say a lot of positive things about him. Let's just be honest. It just wasn't in the documentary. But as far as an appeal to the masses, it's hard to argue that Warrior was up there at one time. He was up there as far as the demographic that WWF wanted to appeal to, and that's why Vince went with him. Of course, it didn't work out for him, but Warrior was it, man. He really was. He was it.
Yep, I agree. He, much like Hogan, he couldn't do very many moves, but you put him out there and he looked the part and he had that charisma and he had that intrigue because nobody knew what the crap he was talking about any time he did a promo. And so, it just appealed to kids.
Not to totally talk about the other shows, but the Dark Side of the Ring released an episode on the Ultimate Warrior the exact same week that the Warrior biography came out. And on the Dark Side of the Ring, they interviewed his first wife, who was his wife through his first WWF run. And she even said, speaking of his promos, that there were some promos that she was in attendance for, that Warrior would spout off whatever he would say. Then he would go to her and say, what the heck did I just say? I have no idea what I was talking about. So even Warrior didn't know what the heck he was doing. As far as his legacy in the wrestling business, Dad, I know you said that he's probably the worst wrestler of all time, but any positive things that you can bring out about Warrior's legacy of the wrestling business?
Nope.
All right.
No. Even the man, when he was making the Raw after Hall of Fame, when he was on Raw and he made that big speech in the ring, he still was a narcissist then. He didn't stop.
And that mask looked terrible on him.
Oh. He went and cut that out of the cardboard. But he was still a narcissist in his last words to the fans. He was still a narcissist. He was so bad when he...
Nope.
Oh, shoot.
He was so bad a person that...
Oh my gosh. All right, let's put the train back on the tracks. My goodness. This is the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. I hope you guys are having as much fun as we are covering all 8 of these A&E biographies of these wrestling legends. We have hit 6 of them so far. We just talked about one of the worst people in the wrestling business as far as dealing with them professionally. My dad, Billy Belcher, is our special guest, and he ever so eloquently dropped that nope bomb on us. So we appreciate that very much. My brother from another mother, Jared, is here. Y'all got me flustered.
We are off the rails, ladies and gentlemen.
We are totally off the rails. It's your fault. Jared Justice is here, Mr. Old School. I'm Chris Belcher. We appreciate you all joining us for the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. We go from one of the worst individuals in the wrestling business to arguably one of the best. The next biography that we're going to cover is Mick Foley. And if you weren't a Mick Foley fan before watching this biography, stop this podcast right now and go watch it, because this biography was so well done. Mick Foley was painted in such a light that, again, if you didn't like him, I don't know how you couldn't have liked him before, but you watch this documentary, this guy is the biggest teddy bear that you'll ever see in your life. Dad, I know that this really I know you were a Foley fan before, but this really turned you into a big Foley fan watching this documentary.
Yeah, I've watched it 3 times. Because I wanted to make sure when I seen it the first time, oh, is this true? And then the second time, it really is. And then the third time, you just enjoy the heck out of it, because he is really, really, he give his life, his body and soul to wrestling.
He did.
Nobody wrestled as hard as Mick Foley or worked as hard as him.
100%.
He didn't have no crazy finishing moves. He didn't have no crazy finishing moves, but he wasn't mean, but he could wrestle. He could wrestle with the best of them. And he didn't care about hurting his body.
Right.
And a lot of them won't do that. And he's just a great human being. That's all you can say.
Jared, there's not a whole lot more to add to Mick Foley as personally and his legacy in the wrestling business, but what more can you add, if any?
Man, just that he gives that story that we all kind of had in our brains that we wished for ourselves as we were growing up. Maybe, that you couldn't get yourself into looking like a Greek god, or maybe that you couldn't go and be an Olympic gold medalist. But you're just a person, and you just love this crazy thing that somehow you got introduced to called wrestling, and you would do anything to be in that spotlight and to take part of it, and you would put your body on the line to make that happen, and that's what Mick did, man. I mean, he gave hope to an average Joe becoming one of the best, you would say wrestlers or performers, but a combination of both of those.
Yep.
So
I agree.
It's just a good story about you set your mind to what you want and you can make it happen.
And yeah, he made no bones about it that this was what he wanted to do, and nothing was going to stop him. A funny story that they didn't include on there, but that Jared, you and I are very familiar with. They talked a little bit about Foley and his promos as Mankind and having the Rat with him. And for those of you who don't know, the Rat in the promos, his name was George. And George actually belonged to one James E. Cornette.
Wow.
That was his pet rat, George. And there's a hilarious story that I'm not even going to try to.
Had little things on his chest, and it was just making him breathe. And George just struggled that last breath. And oh God, they just did so much surgery, and George just didn't make it.
For the context of that story, please go listen to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard and his episode about Jim Cornette, because I promise you will not quit laughing. That was fantastic, by the way. Thank you for doing that.
Really good. Really good.
George the Rat Stories, Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard. Go check it out on YouTube and wherever you find your podcast. Anyway, let me pose this question to you guys. Clearly, we talked about the person that Mick Foley was, but I think this documentary also shed a big light on how creative Mick Foley was and what a great mind that Mick Foley had. His Cactus Jack Manson character was so far ahead of its time that it's ridiculous. In today's wrestling landscape, that kind of character would be perfect. Combine it with all the big bumps and, the craziness of the mind and all that kind of stuff. It would fit in well. But in the 80s and the early 90s, WCCW and WCW and those guys didn't know what to do with him. They did not know what they had, but they kept him around anyways. Ric Flair was very critical about some of the stuff that Mick was doing. He said, I don't know how he did it all these years without drinking. But Ric Flair was very critical about all the bumps that Mick Foley had taken through his career, basically saying that you didn't need to do that. And, there's not many people in the crowd tonight. Don't do that, or, whatever. Obviously, part of Mick's legacy is going to be known for taking all of those bumps, but his evolution of his characters, the Cactus Jacks, the Dude Loves, and the early stuff, we don't give it as much credit. Do you think that if you took away all the crazy bumps, because Rick said, he told him, he said, you got nothing left to prove. With Mick, he had something to prove because he wasn't on Ric Flair's level. Do you think if you took all of those crazy bumps away, that Mick Foley's character would be good enough that Cactus Jack Manson and through the years to carry his career all the way through to where it is now? Or is that type of character just not accepted enough in those early days that if he hadn't been taking those crazy bumps, people would have just kind of wrote him off and he would have been, his career would have been over before it got started? Jared, what do you think about that?
So as portrayed, I don't think that he would have been nearly as big as what he is without the bumps. But if you had taken the bumps away from him before he ever got started and let him use his psyche to have influence on his character direction, then I think that he still could have been one of the most interesting characters of all time.
Yep.
But he would have had to rely way more on the storytelling and protected bumps, if possible, instead of these crazy. I mean, I remember this man at Pikeville College Gym at Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and he took a back body drop as I was looking on from the bleachers onto concrete, and I asked Mom and Dad, is that real? And the same thing they tell me about the blood. Oh, no, there's something there protecting him. There wasn't. And the blood was also real, just so everybody knows. But, I mean, Pikeville College Gym in Pikeville, Kentucky, who's ever heard of it? Diesel has, and he made fun of it plenty. But, I mean, other than that, he was taking a back body drop onto concrete for probably 600 people. Right. It's just crazy.
It is. It's crazy. And he had to prove himself. Like you said, sorry, Ric Flair, you were at the top of the card and maybe you didn't have to take those bumps, but Foley did to be able to get himself over because creatively people just weren't thinking the way he was. Dad, what's your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think he would have been if he just stayed Cactus Jack, he would have had a really good career. And if he not take as many bumps, right. But he wouldn't have had a Hall of Fame career like he has now. Because what he did, his innovations, his mind, what he did in the ring and out of the ring, like he's in a tag team match and he's sitting out there reading a book till it's time to get tagged in.
Oh my gosh, that was hilarious.
He's sitting there reading the book and looking back and he just, okay, ain't my turn yet. He's just so innovative.
Yep.
And he put his heart, everything he had into his character. And that's what made him special.
Yep.
I mean, you see the Undertaker talking about him, and he's just sitting there shaking his head. Oh, Mick, you went off the top of the cage. You fell through on your back. You don't need to do nothing else. And he brings the tax out.
Yeah.
He brings the tax out.
Yeah.
So
other than that match, Jared, because obviously that match is, when you think of Mick Foley, immediately your mind goes to the Undertaker Hell in a Cell match, 1998. That is not only probably the most defining moment in Foley's career, it's one of the most defining moments in the history of wrestling. You can argue that the wrestling business totally changed that night. Other than that match, is there moments or memories or matches of Foley that really sticks out in your brain as something that when you think of Mick Foley, this is something I want to go watch?
Anything with him in WCW against Vader or against Sting. But I remember that spin the wheel, make the deal at Halloween Havoc between him and Vader. And I remember specifically watching WCW Worldwide. I was watching it live, and the ring it was set on this circular thing that would spin.
Yep.
And I remember Cactus Jack on the outside of it. Vader picks him up and power bombs him onto this spinning apparatus that the ring is sitting on, and just thinking, my God, what's this guy going to do next? You know?
Yeah, that's it's crazy. That's just one of the many insane bumps that Foley would just be like, yeah, I'll do that on every night. Yeah, let's just do it every night. It's fine. Dad, what about you when you think of Foley? Is there a match or two that jumps out to you?
Well, all of his matches, for the most part, were really, really good. I think, and I know the Undertaker, and it was phenomenal that he went off top of the cage and fell through, and he come back and all that. But his match with Edge, when Edge set him on fire,
yes,
that's probably the best match I've ever seen him wrestle.
Me too.
He didn't care for nothing. He just kept coming back for more.
Yep.
And he's a number one selling author on the New York Times. He's a comedian.
Yeah.
He's a great dad. And a couple of things I found out about, when he left the WWE, when he retired, he became a crisis counselor for people.
Yeah.
And I
didn't know that either.
His wife said, I'd go and check on him. It'd be 6 o'clock in the morning. And he's still talking to somebody, trying to talk them out of something they were going to do to themselves. So the man is just phenomenal. I think he's one of the best that WWE has ever had. He wasn't super at everything, but he was great at all of it. Yep. So I have a newfound following for him now.
That's awesome.
And and another thing that's so funny, when he was corporate Mankind and where his ear was cut off, he put them sunglasses on, one of them fall down, and then he tried to put the pin behind his ear. It fell down in the floor. And he just go, whoops. So, he's one of the best.
He is. Jared, anything else you want to add about Foley before we move on to our final documentary?
He was a crisis counselor. So, I guess if you're going to do something crazy to yourself, this would be the perfect man to tell you how much it is going to hurt.
And not to do this.
Other than that, that's all I got.
Well, one of the things that, he was quoted in the documentaries, he said, if it looked like it hurt, it hurt.
Yeah.
So, there's no doubt about that. That you're right. If there's somebody that could tell you about it, that guy could.
One more real quick tidbit. His wife on his first date, he went out on his first date with his wife, and he took her home, and he said, I thought I was going to get a kiss, something like that. And she looked at him, shook his hand, said, thank you, Frank, for the date. She called him Frank Foley.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. All right. Let's wrap up with our last victim. Well, not really victim. Arguably one of the greatest in-ring technicians to ever lace up a pair of boots. a documentary that I was very hesitant about watching. And I'll honestly say it's probably my least favorite one. We'll get there. But we're talking about Bret the Hitman Hart, the last one. Jared, I'll start with you. You know how I feel about Bret. Was there anything that opened your eyes in this documentary about Bret? Anything that you learned maybe that you didn't know, or something that may have changed your mind about Bret?
Man, when I look back at great wrestlers and a lot of memories I have, during that 94, 95, 96 time frame, it was Bret. Those matches that me and you were, acting out and stuff whenever that we would wrestle each other or whatever. But it's just crazy to see that this man, he had such a great career, and then the screw job happened, and for whatever reason, it's like he lets this event completely destroy the rest of his life. And
you got it.
I mean, he could have went to WCW, and maybe if he hadn't have been such a crybaby and been so depressed, that he could have had a little, at least a few memorable moments in WCW to wrap up his career.
Absolutely.
But I just feel like he was such a great wrestler, and he would have went down in history so well if he just had not let this one incident get the best of him for the rest of his life, even up to this very moment in time.
Well, one of the things that I took from that, and Dad, I'll let you weigh on in this too, because I actually have exactly what you wrote in my notes to talk about. It's like, I know that he said that wrestling was his life. He was born into wrestling. That's why he took it so seriously. That's why everything mattered when it came to wrestling. And I get that. It's his family's legacy. That's how they, that's how they built their life, was on wrestling. So when everything that you think that you know, and the man that arguably you trust as much as your family, Vince McMahon, when they let you down, I can see how that would put him in such a bad spot. However, like you said, if he would have picked himself back up and maybe had a better attitude about WCW, yes, I know he didn't want to go there. He was very vocal about not wanting to go there. But he could have made that run more successful than what it was if he would have just got over his feelings. I won't say got over his feelings about Montreal, but moved on from it and tried to make the best of it. And he didn't do that. So nobody really thinks fondly about his WCW stuff, and why should they? But it's sad to see that Montreal is really where his career ended. That was it. That's the end of Bret Hart, for lack of a better term. And then obviously the tragedy with Owen just made it that much worse. So I get hardships in your life. Those are some major events, but you gotta pull your bootstraps up and you got to do something about it, and Bret really wallowed in all of that. I'm not saying he's a bad person for that. It just sucks for him, I guess. Dad, what's your thoughts?
Well, I agree with you. You and Jared both about his pinnacle in his life. It turned his life around a lot was when the Montreal screw job happened. Of course, he was reluctant about going to WCW when he got there. He just didn't like he was given 110%. He gets kicked in the head by Goldberg. And accidents happen in the ring. I'm not saying Goldberg, did it on purpose, but accidents happen in the ring. Sure, and that it really bothered him a whole lot. And then he goes and, the thing would happen with Owen, because the point about Owen is when Owen was born, Stu told Bret that he was his brother's keeper to take care of him all the time and do things for him. So that really bothered him. And I guess it got to the point, the stress, and that's when he had a stroke. And, everybody has a lot of stuff in their life, and I guess, things happen. But, as far as in-ring performer, he's right. He is next to Shawn. To me, him and Shawn are the best two in-ring performers. But he says excellence execution. Well, he is. He lives that out.
Yep.
There's no better technical wrestler than Bret Hart.
Nope.
Tag team or single.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too. Tag team stuff. His stuff with Anvil as the Hart Foundation is some of my favorite stuff ever. Jared, I know you'll remember this. SummerSlam 1990, the 2 out of 3 falls match against Demolition. Oh my gosh. Like probably one of my favorite tag matches of all time. To me, I mean, Bret and Shawn, Dad, you hit the nail on the head. It's so interesting that their careers have paralleled so much, as they were both fantastic tag wrestlers, and then they become single stars, and their careers just went to a whole other level. But you can pick out so many good things between both their tag runs and their singles runs. We mentioned Piper earlier, WrestleMania 8, Bret and Piper. One of the only times that Piper ever took a clean pinfall was to Bret Hart. And that just goes to show you how much, how
he respected.
The respect that everybody had for Bret Hart, at least at the time. Jared, what other matches? I know you mentioned 94, 95. I know the Diesel match at Survivor Series 95 is, one that sticks out. You already mentioned the Iron Man match. Obviously, the Bret and Austin match, WrestleMania 13. Some people regard that as the greatest WrestleMania match of all time. I know your boy Conrad Thompson does. What other kind of Bret stuff sticks out to you as some of your favorites?
Him against Kane in the early days when Kane was Dr. Isaac Yankem. With Jerry Lawler, and him shoving Lawler's own foot into his mouth. Bret winning that first televised as a pay-per-view King of the Ring.
Yep.
And then, like you said, back whenever it was the Hart Foundation, remember they went out there against, I think it was the Bolsheviks, and the Bolsheviks or whatever were singing that Russian national anthem, and they hit the heart attack and just beat them just like that. I think at the time it was like the fastest, the quickest WrestleMania match of all times.
Was that at 6? I feel like that was 6.
I think it was 6, yes.
Yeah, 6. Dad, are there some specific Bret Hart matches? I know we could mention again that In Your House episode that we mentioned, or show that we mentioned earlier. Bret Hart was in the main event of that show in a steel cage against Diesel, and that's when The Undertaker came up through the ring and pulled Diesel down. Yeah, we were there for that. That was fun. Some of your favorite Bret matches or memories?
I can honestly say that I think 95% of the matches I watched him were really good. He was always on point. And, like you said earlier, he was born into it, so he lived it all his life.
Yep.
I think when he went to WCW, and of course, all that stuff, that kind of brought him down a little bit. But a couple of points I'll make is, and I might be mistaken, but I think this is right, he's the only Triple Crown winner in both WCW and WWE.
That sounds right.
And then another point I'll make is he holds the record, and you can look this up and see, for holding the title for the most days, 654 of anybody. So, next to Shawn, and Stone Cold, that's the best 3 in WWF ever, in my opinion.
If you're talking about pure wrestling ability, there's not too many people that that compare to Bret Hart. That's 100% true.
Well, if you were raised in a dungeon and you got twisted like a pretzel, and your dad just sat there and laughed at you, you learned how to take it and you know how to give it out.
Yep.
But the 2 things that I found was most interesting. They had a bear living under their porch.
I did not know that. That was insane.
They had a bear living there, and they would feed it and everything. And the other point is, he's a cartoon sketch artist.
I forgot about
that.
And
he's really good. He's really good. But I think his lasting legacy is he's arrogant. He's really a good wrestler.
And he's going to tell you about it because we just lost Dad. Sorry about that, y'all. I know what he was trying to say, though, is that Bret Hart is arrogant. Bret Hart is, I don't want to say selfish, but Bret Hart is good and he knows it, right? I mean, and and it's okay to be good and know it and that kind of thing. But I mean, do you really have to tell everybody?
Yeah, I think that it would make a lot more sense if Bret had stuck with this persona and what he acted like he had, which was being the best there is, best there was, and best there ever will be. Well,
Right.
after Montreal, he didn't let himself continue to be the best that there ever would be.
Right.
And so I think that's his stopping point. But up until then, yeah, exactly what he said was the truth.
He still had a lot of gas left in the tank. He really did by that point. So it's just a shame to see that he, that he couldn't fulfill all of that. You know what I mean? He couldn't. I don't know what the right word is, but it's a shame. It really is. Because like I said, I really feel like that Bret's career ended in Montreal. Well, we will hopefully get Dad back in his connection issues here in just a second. Oh man, look at that. Look at that. I called it into existence right there. Dad, I was finishing your thought that Bret, while he's the best ever, he doesn't have to tell everybody. He's arrogant. He likes to talk about himself. And that, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to remember him for that.
Okay, but there's two people that are more arrogant than Bret Hart.
Oh, no. Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. And the Ultimate Warrior.
And the Ultimate Warrior.
God rest his soul. I
knew it. All right, boys. This has been a blast covering all 8 of these biographies. 8 of probably the top ever. I mean, Booker T, maybe not, but 8.
Ultimate Warrior, not.
Well, that's true. Anyway, 8 of the most polarizing wrestlers of all time. And I don't think anybody can argue about that.
Yeah,
8 of the most polarizing, well-known figures of all time. Jared, I'm going to start with you. Anything else you want to add about any of these guys that we have covered extensively? Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, just that. I think that they gave all these guys their fair due, and I'm glad that they showed some of the negativity as well as they did the positivity. So,
yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, they did a really good job of painting these guys in a light where they are well known and they're respected and they're loved, but also you can't tell the highs without telling the lows. You got to tell the whole story. And I think A&E was the right partnership for WWE to be able to do this and to be able to get the stories out of all these guys. Dad, anything else that we left out that you want to add before we sign off?
No, I agree with you. You can't tell a biography without telling the whole story from beginning to end. And I think that what they covered on some of the guys come to light a lot of people didn't know about and could appreciate them more, especially Mick Foley. I think that a lot of people through the time have not appreciated Mick as much as what he's done in the business. I mean, you ask anybody about Stone Cold, everybody knows Stone Cold. Everybody knows Bret. Everybody knows Shawn. But they didn't know Mick's whole story, and I think that was the best one of them. I think that's just my opinion.
Mick Foley has a new number 1 fan, ladies and gentlemen. That being said, Dad, really appreciate you jumping on and talking about all these with us. You're welcome back on the podcast anytime.
Anytime you guys want me, just let me know. You got to give me a day ahead of time so I can make notes and think of one-liners or something. But I really enjoyed it. And you know, Chris, growing up, I brought you into wrestling. There's not a lot of people like that.
True. That's true. That's true.
I give you your paw prints in wrestling, but
listen, all you got to do is come up with your 1 words. Ready? Nope. That's it. That's all you need.
Nope.
Oh, that's great. All right. For my dad hopping on and joining us, for my brother from another mother, Mr. Old School, Jared Justice, I am Chris Belcher. Thank you all so much. Make sure that you subscribe to our show every Monday and Thursday, brand new episodes on wherever you find your podcast, and you can see our smiling faces on YouTube. Please make sure you check us out. I'm Chris Belcher. This has been the PipeBomb Wrestling Podcast. We will catch you guys down the road.